Nice. All right. Well, this is a bonus episode. We are joined, of course, by the one and only Keishan. How should our listeners and viewers note your name as?
Oh, absolutely key.
Key. All right.
It's what I've gone through, gone with
It's what you've gone through.
for a long time, industry wise. Yeah, no full government needed.
Perfect. Well, Key's a screenwriter, and so I'm looking forward to hopefully doing more of these one-offs where we talk about a film or show and just kind of break down. A lot probably as screenwriters, we'll probably have a lot of story and writing technique stuff that we're trying to learn from and glean from things that we're looking at. Key, I'm curious.
West, we got to talk about these shots too, though, because
I have a
they're
few.
beautiful.
I have a few that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. Before we jump into today's episode on the Bear, what you been writing? What have you been working on?
Yes, I'm writing. I'm working on currently two pilots. One is a dramedy, my first time writing a dramedy, so trying to do a half hour, keep it a little light because I tend to write a little bit darker. Um, it's about two sisters and a mom and their housing crisis, but funny. We'll see.
It sounds comedic by nature. Yeah.
And the other one is a Black maternal health pilot about the health crisis that some Black women face as they are pregnant or giving birth and after birth, well, postpartum complications. And so I finished the dramedy. The dramedy is called Belle Redesigned. I finished the dramedy about 2 weeks ago on another version of the one that I'm calling At Death's Door. So that will be finished hopefully end of August with some rewrites. And yeah, that's what we're going through.
Wow. So are you pretty good on your deadlines? Like you give are these self-imposed deadlines?
Somewhat, yes. I have a writing group and a virtual writing group with three women in Austin. I'm in LA now. I live in LA now. And we basically meet biweekly, and one or two people present every time. And so that kind of keeps me accountable. It keeps them accountable. Um, and then the other one is I'm working with a script consultant because it's a script that I've been working on for 3 or 4 years and it's just killing me. So I needed some outside perspective, and she's amazing. I'm working with a woman named Pilar Alessandra. And that deadline has to do with our next meeting.
Hmm.
So sometimes self-imposed, but I try to create systems, where I have to show up.
Right, you're on vegetables today. Hey, this is this is my area. I'm on
Yeah,
vegetables today. Get away from my potatoes.
exactly. Exactly. So it's how we're cooking it up, chef. Yeah, and so it's good. It's good. It helps me because this year I really wanted to concentrate on the craft
Hmm.
and maybe not submit to as many festivals or fellowships, things like that. And so next year, when everything opens up, I'll be ready. Um,
What does that mean to you
so
when you say you want to work on the craft?
I really wanted to. So I have about 6 scripts in different forms. I would say 4 finished scripts, one in like very detailed, and these are pilots, one in very detailed outline form. So it really just takes me fleshing that out. And the other one that I am just said is not quite done yet. It will be done in the end of August. So for me, it's really creating a couple new stories, sharpening up those finished scripts, so going through the rewrite process, and reading books about screenwriting, evaluating scripts, watching fantastic shows like the one we're about to discuss, to just strengthen my skill set. And because a lot of times when the fellowships come around or the screenwriting contests and things like that, they're also asking for personal essays. They're asking for these statements, or they're asking pretty
Hmm.
robust essay questions. And so if you're still stumbling through your script rewrite, and then you also have that, it's just a lot. Sometimes those fellowships only open for 2 weeks at a time, so it's not like you actually know what's due when. When they open up, that's kind of when you see everything that they're looking for. So it's just a race, and I don't want to race, at least with what I can prepare with, and that's my scripts. So I'm working on the craft this year, and next year, of course, I'll be continuing writing, but I think I'll be in a better place where I feel confident in what I have.
Dang, nice.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm on draft 17 of my feature film script. I don't know how you version your drafts off, but I tend to version it once I send it to someone to read.
Oh, okay.
And assuming I go back to work on it before someone else gets to read it, there might be like, two or three people get it, and now I've had two or three new versions. Because for me, I don't know about you, but before I let someone read it, I tend to do some tightening, like, oh, don't forget you wanted to go back and edit this real quick. And so there is some level of, I don't just hit save and print, and then it's like, oh, it's whatever it is whatever it is. I really try to like not forget any little things that moments that I want to go back to. So there is some level of cohesion to a draft as I version these off. And this latest version though is being dramatically altered as I'm performing each scene into a mic and cutting it in Premiere. And that is really reshaping my approach. I think I've gotten really lazy over the last 10 years of being a professional filmmaker for people who are not letting me make whatever it is I want to make. When you have a client, you have to do what the client wants, not what you want, and it's sharpened all the skills that I don't really want when it comes to like exposition or nuance. Everything is much more bludgeoning with client work, and instead of like I want a good 65 seconds of silence while I transition to this next moment, you don't get that, and so I'm having to break a lot of old developed habits, and that's been interesting. It's really been useful to create it this way, where you have to perform every character and you have to see, is the rhythm here? Oh man, everything's a little on the nose. How can I make this less obvious? How can I delete things and leave something, a moment, for the camera or for the actor to chew on? Like sometimes you see a monologue and you don't need, a 250 word monologue. A good monologue might be 25 words, right? Because there's so much happening between the sentences, all these little transitions and thoughts, and sometimes even between one word to the next, right? And it's tempting to overwrite a good monologue, because as a writer, right, our weapons are the words, and so this has been a fun process of like rethinking every single moment in my film. Yeah.
That's amazing. First of all, that is tedious and meticulous, and I actually expect nothing less, although I did not know you were doing this. Like that's wild.
It's life changing, and from a writing standpoint, like I'd never imagined myself doing this, but I've always had a really easy time keeping a story in my head if I'm working on a client or just even one of my own smaller stories. I've never had a problem keeping the entire thing in my head, so I can make a few notes and then go shoot it. I don't need to like, I don't know, obsess too much about it because I can see, oh yeah, I wrote like close up here, but I knew that for a close up, I also want to transition to this next moment, and that moment is going to be this mood piece, and I could see all that in my head and hold it all there while in pre-production, through production, through my edit, right? I can't do that with a movie, or at least not yet. Like, there's that old
Beast.
thing with,
Beast.
was it Jay-Z, right? He talks about like, I would write these sentences in my head, and when I get home, I'd write it down, and it kind of became an exercise, right? The Black Album, and I don't know if I ever get to that point where I can keep this whole movie in my head, but having it performed in a timeline sequence has been a way to be like, okay, I can feel this now in my head, even if I still need help containing it all. It's a really wild process for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I feel.
Yes, I just wow. How much time is this taking?
Oh gosh, it's not fast. I gotta tell you, I would love for it to be something where I'm just like cranking out 15, 20 pages because it's already written, right? What's the big deal? All the words are there, but it's very exhausting to read through your scene, think through it. How am I going to perform this? What is happening in this moment? What's the point of the scene? Is this the correct approach? And then recording it, and then maybe pausing, editing the script, re-recording. And so I'm probably doing only like 2 pages a day. Like it's, I need to get faster though, because my producer needs the new version of the script, and I'm taking out like 10 pages of script. I'm going from like an 85 page to I'm aiming at like 75. Tighten it, lower on the budget, much more ambiguous. I'm leaning into kind of the art house aesthetic of ambiguity. And in order to do that, I really need to just be able to chew on each one of these scenes. And so I'm hoping to be done in the next few days, but I'm on page 30 out of 75 or 80. Yeah, and so it's slow going, Kei.
Listen, you are a true artist. Like that is something special.
That's the word
amazing.
for it. It is special. It was inspired though by, I think, Baby Driver. I was like, that sounds fun. That sounds like nothing I would ever want to do. But then I just kept frustrating myself, and I was like, you know what? Maybe it's time I do that. Maybe it's time I just sit down, pay the piper, and see if it helps. And geez, big difference. Big difference. Yeah. I can see a movie now. Before it was just kind of characters doing a bunch of things on a page, and now it's like, oh no, this is a movie. Yeah.
So what's the dream here? Are you hoping to finance and shoot it all yourself? Are you hoping to sell it? Are you?
Yeah, well, my producer came on with the idea that he would handle the sales, acquisition, distribution stuff. That's his big motivator. I am excited about that, but for me, I just want to shoot it. So I've got like 40 grand, 20 of which will go to film, stock, and processing, scanning. So I got like 20 for production, which also is why I'm trying to pare it back, for budget reasons. And my goal is to shoot it in the next 2 months. But to make that happen, I need my producer to get on board. He's coming from the standpoint that, well, let's not rush. I don't want to make a piece of shit. And which of course I take immediate offense to.
Why would you take offense to that?
Yeah. What would be the implication of my skill as a filmmaker in saying something like that? And for me, I've been working on this for 1.5 years. So there's nothing rushed about this whatsoever. But I'm ready to make it. I'm ready to make it so I can start working on the next thing and make that. I'm a big believer in iteration and repetition. And I think if I'm going to get better as a feature film director, I need to be making feature films. And so that's my motivation. Like, I'm ready to make it. I can see it in my head, and waiting too long, it'll die on the vine, right? Like, there's a good time to pick an apple and there's a bad time to pick an apple. And I'm trying to pick the apple when it's ripe. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what we got going on. I'm excited to translate some of that into what we pulled out of The Bear. And so to get us started, for one, The Bear is a show on Hulu, I guess co-produced or produced through FX. I don't know what kind of weird partnership they got going on, but I need more of it because everything they do seems to be just gold, just absolute dynamite, unbelievable gold. And to get us into the headspace, I have a nice, calm, meditative clip that I'm going to play for us. No setup.
Ibra, make sandwiches. Don't stop making fucking sandwiches.
Yes, chef.
I'm gonna make 3 sections, okay? They're gonna be wet, hot, and sweet. All right, I'm gonna take green tape, make those sections. Louis, I want you to get the sandwiches, put them in the corresponding sections. Copy?
Okay, yeah.
Yo, sweet, bag, Sharpie, label that shit, please, chef.
Yes, chef.
Tina, fire every single chicken we have, please, okay? Richie, do you even know how to do fries?
Yes, I know we need them now.
Okay, Marcus, where are we on cakes?
Get in there.
getting there. What the fuck do you... Marcus, what the fuck are you doing still working on this shit?
Yo, come on, what are you tripping for?
Come
the
on,
cakes are
what
in
the
the
fuck
oven.
am I tripping
If
for?
I'm doing
Are
this
you
till they're done,
here right now?
it doesn't make a difference.
There's 4 cakes and still...
Yeah, I was going to cut them.
They're not even cut yet?
Yeah, it's
Yo,
not
what
that
is
big
it?
of a
What
deal.
is it? Chef!
I'm doing them in 5, basically. I'm gonna order them in
stop.
5.
Everything. Fire everything right fucking now.
Okay, I'll fire everything now. I just was finishing
Step
talking
out.
to Marcus and
Step out.
Okay, I'm gonna talk to Marcus.
Step out. Get
I'll order...
the fuck off my expo chef now! Get the fuck off! Thank you. We're firing 76 beefs, 34 chickens, okay? 12 French fries, 12 mash, fucking now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Behind. Corner. Oh. You didn't say corner. You didn't say corner.
Fuck you, Richie.
You don't need to curse at me
Fuck
like a maniac. You didn't say corner.
Fucking maniac.
It's your
man.
bullshit that fucked us today, not mine. It's your bullshit.
Fuck you, Richie.
Sydney.
Fuck you.
I like that pace, Louis.
So chill, as I'm sure all kitchens are. So many thoughts and questions. First, just apropos of absolutely nothing. Am I wrong? I see so much Regina when I watch Sydney, our friend Regina. Like, I see so much Regina in her. The way she repeats what you said, she can be both absolutely deadpan serious or sarcastic. You don't know which is which until like about a minute after the fact, you know? And so
I hadn't thought of that, but I can totally see Regina in this. There's this... Sydney's such a fascinating character to me. Oh my goodness. She's so smart, but as Carmi said in one of the episodes, green and impatient, and I see a little bit of myself in her, but I don't think I was her level of brave at her age.
100%.
And it's amazing. It's amazing to watch.
So what is it? I don't know how you feel about kitchen dramas. I seem to just love them. Do you have what is it about the bear or kitchen dramas that is just so freaking compelling?
I don't know that I watch that many kitchen dramas. Not that I stay away from them. What was that one movie with
Chef? Jon Favreau?
Yeah, was it Chef?
Yeah.
With who was it?
Jon Favreau?
Yes. Was he the star?
Mm-hmm. He wrote, direct, and starred. About the food
Oh,
truck.
there was something else. No. There was something else. Anyway, the bear, it just feels like this perfectly contained story in a perfectly contained small space for the most part. The way they're able to utilize this environment, this world that some people know and some people don't. I've never worked in a restaurant. It's just fascinating to me, but it's really a simple story, right? It is the story of Carmi taking over his dead brother's restaurant and trying to make it survive. But like, I have no idea why it's so interesting, except that they just made it hella interesting. You know what I mean? Like, we're not dealing with wars or famine, we're dealing with the survival of a restaurant. And these characters are amazing. The acting is amazing. The writing is fantastic. The cinematography is gorgeous. I'm currently vegan and I want meat so bad just because of this show. Like, the way they sprinkle the salt on the beef is gorgeous. It is complete. I don't even have a complaint really about this show. I want to sop it all up with a piece of bread, like all the gravy and all the little pieces of meat strailing on the plate. That's how lovely this show is. It's great. It's wonderful. What's appealed to you?
Oh, I don't know. I have that same feeling of I can't quite put my finger on it, but when I think of food, for one, it's universal, right? We all eat, right? We all, appreciate also expertise, and watching people who are excellent in their field do something that I do every single day. But but better, right? Is really fascinating just to watch people who are passionate about it, because there is this sense of artistry that they're bringing to it, right? It's not just food, the way they talk about it, and the way they educate each other on it, and how serious they take it. Like, to me, growing up, thinking about food was like the cafeteria lady just kind of slopping it on the plate, right? And here it's like life or death to them, and whether or not someone likes your dish is of supreme importance. And it's so fascinating watching Sydney's reaction when, depending on who is tasting her food. Like, she couldn't give a shit what Marcus thought of her food. She knew it was great. But when Carmy takes a bite of her food, she's holding her breath. It's suddenly like my planet is about to stop spinning if he says he doesn't like my dish. And you just feel that tension and that hope, just resting on her face. And I think that's what it is, right? It's this anticipation of, am I good enough? Because food is timing specific. The same dish could be terrible 5 minutes too late if you let it sit and get cold, right? It's all about everything coming together all at once. And in that way, it's, filmmaking times 100. Because filmmaking, you can recreate a moment, 100 times. Just ask David Fincher. Whereas in a restaurant, you get one shot, and if you don't do it right, you got to start from scratch. And all of these things are kind of colliding, and then on top of that, you have the unhealthy attitudes and the danger of it. There's nothing that compares to watching just knives being chopped, millimeters away from someone's finger. If you want, it's easy tension every single time. Like, not only let's do that, let's get really close, let's hype up the audio, and let's speed up the track, right? Let's speed up the frames per second. And so we'll ramp up the speed so that it makes it that much more heightened. And it's just, you're just going to hold your breath like, is someone about to chop a finger off every single time? And they do a lot of that stuff to kind of ramp up the pressure, the tension, right? Whether that's those fast shots of the clock, right? Where it's just ticking. And you're like, oh man, yeah, I guess time is of the essence, right? Time is precious, lots to do. Or just those close-ups of the fire, the spitting grease popping in your ear, Carmy jittery, right? He's like tapping the spoon between his fingers as he's talking to someone. He's acting so duck on the water, right? So calm. Then we cut to like he's just wagging this fucking spoon in his hand. Loud noises everywhere, right? The clanging of pots and pans. Like, they're taking advantage of every single thing. People yelling at each other, yelling for this or yelling for that. And they're just taking full advantage of everything that film has to offer: the visuals, the sound, the speed, and the personalities just all collide into maximum tension. And I think that's the appeal to me, is I don't do what they do, and I'm terrified to even attempt it.
So the film I was talking about was Burnt.
Cooper.
John Wells directed, Bradley Cooper starred. That was one of my favorite things to watch in the last 10 years. But I gotta jump on with you regarding Carmy. Like, his anxiety attacks, I feel so much. He's usually not in front of people, so he steals away to the office, or he goes outside, or he's da-da-da. But that is just, it's just so well done. I am loving the conversation about the ecosystems, and I think in episode six, which is called Saris, because this is when John Bernthal shows up. First of all, that was like, listen, I've been a fan for a long time. Walking Dead, The Punisher, when he showed up, I screamed, because whenever he shows up in anything, I am such a fan. I scream. But in that episode, Richie's talking about ecosystems. And at first we're dealing with the ecosystems in the neighborhood, right? The bar closed down. They're talking about what's going on across the street. So a restaurant called Sweet Green, I think. And then, of course, we have the gangs outside and their whole, like, whose territory is this? Whose block is this? This is the gunshot episode, I believe, and everything, right? So you're talking about all those ecosystems. But what Richie's really afraid of is the ecosystem in the restaurant, right? And that's what so much of the show is about. Carmy's coming in, changing the system, changing their process, changing the food, giving people new things to do, new skills, changing the hierarchy, creating a hierarchy, right? Making Sydney the sous chef, and Richie doesn't know his place anymore. Richie doesn't know his place. And so even to the point where he's the violent one, right? He's the one to go out and get the gangs to calm down because he's looking for his gun. Well, Sydney has soothed the situation with food and a little bit of negotiation. So when he's out the back talking to Tina at the end, talking about I'm going to quit, it's because he doesn't know his place anymore. And this show, that's totally what it is. Everyone's looking for their place, just like you're saying with Sydney. Sydney's looking for, Carmi's looking for his place, Richie's looking for, and Tina's story about her place. This woman, she is phenomenal in her acting. Lisa Colon Zayas, like I can't even, she's brilliant. She's brilliant. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, Tina blew me away. And just the progression throughout the first several episodes to slowly expand our universe, because that first episode, right, is mostly about Richie and Carmi and a sprinkle of Sid, right? And otherwise, we don't really know who's who or what's going on. And so they just do a great job of getting us oriented in this universe with the main players and then slowly building that out. And I think it's probably episode 2 where we get a hint of Tina. Right, we bring in those aprons, and I love the use of that. They do such a great job of exposition throughout this series, but especially the first 2-3 episodes. Right, they have all these different techniques of. To me, I don't know about you, writing wise, exposition is the hardest thing to do. Like, how do you tell a viewer an important piece of information without making it, a stamp? Right? How do you not break out the big red like? Oh, brother died, oh, he's sad, right? Or whatever. And so I love all these little techniques that they do. And one of them is through contrast, exposition through contrast, maybe confusion, frustration, mockery, right? When Richie walks in and he just starts immediately mocking these aprons. What's a cartouche? Why are you yelling? There's 4 of us. And they do such a great job of that because it's highlighting the idea that there's 2 ways of doing things, the way that they've been doing them, right? This brash, unreserved thing. And then there's this higher dimension of operation that Sid and Carmi are doing, right? And they really allow that to be obvious to the viewer through that contrast and displaying here's what they hate and here's what's annoying to watch, let alone to be a part of. And we start to infer that these 2 people are operating at a completely different level. And those uniforms, those aprons, become a really easy stamp of who's on board and who's not. Super clean. It's bright as hell, right? This purple. And the first thing, we get a taste of is Tina saying, yeah, fuck that shit. What the hell is this? This is garbage, right? And so we immediately are now back on our heels like, oh God, here we go. Someone's not on board. I didn't think Tina was going to last. I thought she was going to be hitting the bricks, right? And it takes her ages. It takes her ages because she resents. There's that great little montage, right, where we have this kind of conversational exposition where we're listening to everyone bitch and complain, right? Everyone's talking shit behind Sydney's back. And one group is over here, and I think it is Tina, and she's like, she's just trying to take over and run everything. And then we cut to Ibram, and he's, talking shit. And I love it because it's setting up a conflict while expositing what Sydney wants through their fears. And so Sydney never actually has to say, I want to run this kitchen. She kind of hints at it at one point in an early conversation, but even that is just kind of layered into I'm here to learn kind of attitude. But instead, what they allow us to do is express her desires through the fears of everyone around her, right? They don't want to be subjected to her. And so now we have a conflict set up through Tina choosing to not wear a thing, to not partake, to screw with her potatoes, right? We have that great moment where Sydney walks away and she cranks up the heat and ruins it. And then Sydney takes the heat on that, right? Tina doesn't experience any blowback on that whatsoever. And it's not until Sydney comes, saves her ass, right? Because I don't have time to fuck around, chef. And I love this because it's so slowly devolved, right? We've already set up Tina's not happy with being managed by Sid. And then we have that moment of fixing the potatoes. And I love, because we are in a long take here. And they do such a great job of using long takes. And I love it because we sit with Tina for a good 90 seconds to 2 minutes as she's walking through the kitchen. And we're watching her frustration boil up as she ruins her own batch, right? She realizes, I fucked this. And we're watching her reaction, and it's full of tension. And now we're seeing that Sid is taking care of her. And we don't know how she's going to react now, because we've had all this build up. And is she going to be offended? Is she going to be bitter? She tastes it and she's impressed. And it's this tiny so good, because what is it? 3-4 minutes later, we come back to it and she's finishing her potatoes and she asks Sid to taste it. It's like, hey, chef, can I get your opinion? Tastes great. Thanks, chef. And I love it because Tina walks away. She's happy with herself. Thank you. Thank you, chef. Boom, she's back to work. Like, it's such a beautiful, boiled up, emotional moment. And it's so good because Sid, and I love Sydney so much. She's a tough cookie, right? Like, she just nods. That's it. That's all she gives. Just a quick nod. Like, cool. I got someone on my team, I guess. And that arc with Tina, because by the end, that episode you're talking about with Richie, it's Tina who comes back to him and says, hey, you're screwing up my flow. We got something good here. This isn't the same thing. I've increased my skill 300%. And it's only after that Richie calls the cops on his buddies. He does, and it's a great setup and payoff, because at the beginning of that episode, he's over there talking about, hey, I'm not that guy. You don't got to worry about me. But by the end of the episode, that is that guy. And so how did you feel about not just Tina's story, but how it fits into the greater picture of that ecosystem? And I haven't been thinking about it in those terms. And that's such a fascinating approach to this. And I think you're absolutely right.
I think it's just so well done. Like, when I finished watching it, I remember texting you when I was done watching it, or when I was close to done watching it. And then I said I was going to start watching it, and then I had to actually go work and do writing, right? So it was only in the last couple of days, yesterday and today, that I started rewatching all the episodes. And when I tell you that the brilliance I see is just increased as I watch, that's how you know. And usually when I watch something even if I like it, I don't take notes at first, because I just want to consume it as a fan. And I don't want to be distracted that second that you take to write a note down or whatever, or go off in your brain. Mm-hmm. But it is just so fascinating to see, it's like earlier I talked about how Sid, I wish I was that brave when I was that young, right? But also I can relate to Tina. I was just on set. I hadn't been on set in a long time in a production capacity, right? It'd been a minute since I used all the equipment and moved around the way that I do, or I have, and I'm a little bit older now. So then I was on this whole thing hold on, do I know what I'm doing? Am I going to be okay? How many questions do I ask? And am I going to be seen as washed out? Oh, she's not good enough for this. She can't hang. And so I could see Tina's insecurity in that moment. She's looking at Sid
Oh.
I've been here longer than you've been alive. This is where I live. This is all I know. And now you're coming in and you're pushing me to do things, and quick too, right? There's not a lot of time to learn. It's not like they have a training day. They don't. They just go, right? And if it doesn't work, then you do it over. And, so I'm looking at Tina in another way and thinking, oh man, how hard is it as industries change over, things change quickly, new management comes in, even though that's family to you, it's still, you have to do your job. And she's looking at Richie Richie, I know you love to tell these stories, but can you chill? Can you tell these stories at family dinner? And not when I'm over here stressed about all the elements I need to get, and all the fire and the heat and the things, and Sydney's calling orders out to me, and I'm trying to meet her orders, but you're over here telling the same story, the same kind of stories that are really they're interesting, but they're not of any consequence. And what happened with Sydney and Richie in that moment when Tina was cooking is the same thing that happened with Richie and Carmi in the first episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. Carmi's trying to get Richie to stop so that he can get everybody's attention so they can keep it going. And he's still doing that 5 episodes later, except it's with Sid. And Sid talks to Richie the same way that Carmi talked, like, shut the fuck up, you know? Like, bro, we're working. And it is just very, very interesting. And I think the thing with Sydney is that you can see the compassion that she has for Richie, you know, especially in regards to his daughter messing up with, you know, the caulk and like having his back and making sure that she got the right caulk and that was all going to be fixed, and having sympathy for him, except when he got stabbed in the but there's just there's an insecurity flowing through all of them at some point, you know. It's good.
It's so good. Is there, do you have a favorite character or moment in the show?
Favorite character. So I have a few. One thing that stands out to me is when Sydney comes in to interview with Carm for like the 5 seconds. What kind of interview is that? I wish, can my interviews be that short? And she's just like, yeah, this is a special place. My dad and I used to come here every Sunday. And what you really find out episodes later is that when she was visiting restaurants, she's tasted Carmi's food. And that's why she found him, is because she knows how good he is, not just from hearsay, from actually like being present in his restaurant. That's one thing that I thought like was just like the setup and payoff in this show. Everything is thought out so well.
I love thinking about the arcs in this show. Like, what's amazing to me is this show doesn't really do perfect arcs for each episode. Each episode doesn't live as a nice boilerplate, like, oh, here's how we're going to approach an idea or a topic. Instead, they treat it like cooking, which is they put something on the stove, let it cook for a few episodes before letting it finish, and now we're going to serve it up, right? So, like, episode 2 introduces the suicide note. That's a time bomb. And now we have it in our heads as viewers, like, when is he going to, like, not be a piece of shit and let his brother get, you know, the note that he left him? And of course, Richie puts it back and hides it. And we don't come back to it for 5 more episodes till the end of the season. Like, that's really amazing. And it's a lot of trust. And this is why I think this wouldn't really work as network TV, because network TV needs to be whoever, you know, can sit down and start that episode, can complete it and feel like they got the full picture. Whereas premium, even, you know, FX, you know, starts to rely on your ability as a viewer to be a little bit more sophisticated, that we can do that. Same thing with Michael himself. Like, we don't meet him until the 6th episode. Instead, we're constantly in our mind building out Mikey, who he is, his internal life and his thought process. Even as it ends, we still don't really know who Mikey is, but we know at the same time, we do kind of know. And it's never spelled out. It's allowed for the audience to put it together. And it's a bit of a kaleidoscope. Like, it's whatever angle you want to look at is the angle that you get to pick. Like that note, I love you, dude, let it rip. And we just sit on Carmi's, you know, face as he's processing grief that he's avoided, you know, as his sister relentlessly points out. He's just been avoiding for, you know, this entire thing. And if you start to paint this picture of Carmi finding money stuffed everywhere, and, you know, the debts and the fact that his brother killed himself and that he left that kind of note, like, you can start to put together a really wild picture of a guy who had a lot of struggles, but also a lot of love. And I love that he gets the final shot.
I'm tearing up right now.
What?
I'm tearing up. Because it's actually a really beautiful family story. Like when we get the background when Uncle Jimmy slash Cicero is talking about the picture of the dad at little Nikki's party, and how, he was a new entrepreneur every 10 minutes. He had a new idea, and he left, Carmi's mom with this restaurant. And when you understand this family struggle of them trying to hold on to the restaurant, Michael building up this restaurant, Carmi going off, and Michael not allowing him to work in the restaurant, probably because he knew how good Carmi was and that he didn't need to be stuck there. And this whole story of Michael's dead, Carmi's not around the way they want him to be around, but then he comes when it counts, which is the restaurant. And probably one of the other storylines that really stuck with me is the relationship between Carmi and Sugar, especially as they're looking for the tax documents in the office. And she's sitting on the floor and she says, "You don't ever ask me how I'm doing." And then he says, pretty much like, "How do I ask you how you're doing when I don't know how I'm doing? That seems insane." And I mean, like, we've lived in this freaking pandemic for whatever period of time, right? So many of us are struggling, coping, trying to figure out what's next in this new world, and spending so much time by ourselves, going back into the world. We outside now, whatever. But like, all of those things have affected us in a way that some of us don't know how we're doing. And so it was really easy for me to hear him say that.
Oh, that's so true. I loved that. I guess this kind of goes back to the exposition of it. They never really spell out this and that. Like, even from the first frame, right? They are all about concealing and putting it on the audience to have your own thoughts. And
About what happened?
About everything, right? We start with this dream sequence of a bear in a cage being let out in the middle of a bridge. Like, at no point do they ever define what that symbolized. And you can start to put a picture together by the end of it, but even that is still wide open for interpretation. Instead, what they let us think for, 4 episodes, is that Carmen has an addiction, and that he's struggling with addiction, and that the bear might be his addiction trying to get out, and he's trying to keep it under control. This was my first viewing. That was the big, strong impression that I had until I realized right around there, 3 or 4 or 5 episodes in, whenever he has that conversation with his sister, that I went to AA, and he starts talking about why he went to AA, and it's like, oh, it wasn't because you have an addiction. It's because you're trying to understand your brother. Okay, well, wait. Okay, that's cool. That's amazing. But what is the bear then? Like, what are we doing here? And so they kind of keep, letting these ideas percolate, and they don't come back to that dream until like the final episode, the beginning of episode 8. They have these brief, crazy intercuts with the bear as he's having this nightmare of a hosted talk show, cooking show, right? Like, and you're just like, oh, he's got a lot of anxiety. And so they don't even come back to that image for, the entire season. And even then you start to assume, like, and there's so many layers to it that, again, that's the beauty of throwing it on the audience, is what does it mean to you? And whenever it ended, I was like, oh, the bear was his passion, his dream, which is this restaurant that he wants to. But even that, you could, still think about the bear as his brother, right? And his brother is free. I don't know. What was your thinking, or did you really come back to that idea of the bear at all?
I felt like the bear was him against himself. And I think I didn't realize that was his nickname until the second viewing.
But even at the end, they talk about it is, but also it's Mikey's too.
Oh, is it? Is it Mikey's nickname too?
I want to say it's Richie who says it. He's like, Mikey the bear was a crazy dude or whatever, something like that. This little throwaway line. And I was like, wait, God.
I heard Sugar call Carmi that, and then I heard Cicero called Carmi that. Mm-hmm. So I just thought it was Carmi's alone. But that's interesting.
Right.
That's another spin to it. I mean, it's kind of, the sibling thing is always, your sibling is like your longest running relationship, right? in the ideal situation, someone doesn't pass away. And so certainly they could have similar identities, similar, I mean, they're probably two sides of the same coin, right? Like it's like one just goes off to these Michelin level restaurants and the other one has this amazing hole in the wall in the middle of Chicago City. Like, you know, same skill set, just a different path. And yeah.
So let's talk about episode 7 for a second, because that is just, they melted me down all the way. Like,
what did you think of that?
God,
as a filmmaker? Like, how is like, I was just glued to the screen, but my mind doesn't always work in the technical first. It works in the emotional. And so for me, I'm just looking at this like, oh my God.
It's a very,
what was your reaction?
it's a very similar style to the way I like to shoot, which is a free camera, but usually motivated through movement. And so they do a great job with the blocking, combining blocking with the story so that you're being propelled into new conflicts constantly, right? We might follow Sid around the corner and then pick up Mikey in the background. And now we're going to, or Carmen in the background. And so we're going to sit with Carmi for a minute while he starts yelling at this, that, and the other. And so I was just riveted once I realized they're not going to cut. And I will say that's the one thing Hulu should have not fucked up, which is they still insert these blackouts for the commercial breaks. They should have fixed that for streaming. And I don't know why they didn't do that. That's incredibly dumb. I'm really upset that they did that, actually, because you're breaking tension. You're breaking everything that the filmmaker set out to do, which was to keep everyone pulled in. And it doesn't hurt it, as much as it could. But it's not good. Like, I think there was another level that Hulu ruined through the way they exhibited it. But the other thing that I noticed rewatching it the second time, because you don't know what's coming when you hit play on that episode. But knowing what I was getting into when I hit play this time, I realized they open up that episode with this Sufjan Stevens track and a lot of cuts. Like, we start that episode, a lot of cityscapes, a lot of cutting around before we move into the opener, and I think it's priming us to want to break in the cuts, so that once we finally sit still for a minute, we're like, okay, good, and you don't know that they just pulled you in so that they could throw a right hook, and it's beautiful. You just realize after a good 2 minutes that, oh God, we have not cut yet, and it's just amping up, and we're ramping up, and it starts with that the review that Ibram is reading, and I was blown away because I'm looking at everything they're doing all at the same time. It's not just, hey, can we dance properly with sound and the cam op, right? But it's also, can we naturalize everything? Because it can't just be, hey, it's your line now it's your line. Oh, wait, we missed an opportunity because you didn't realize the camera was still on you, and you just awkwardly paused for a moment. And so you're relying on the writing and the acting to kind of coalesce so that an actor, when the camera's on them, isn't just spitting out their line because, oh, if I get it wrong, they can edit another take in, right? It's, I need to make sure I'm feathering and naturalizing every moment that I'm on camera. And so when you have these moments when Sid is sitting over Richie's shoulder and she's talking to him, like she's eating up that space in a way that feels like a human being, specifically Sydney, and the way she's going to handle that situation. And so they do such an incredible job of allowing the actors a little space to create a moment and to be frustrated before rotating the camera off to someone else. And even whenever we had that nice side moment when Sid and Richie walk out into the front of house and we're following behind them, Sydney sets up behind the counter, Richie sets up on the other side, but the camera op keeps rotating around. We keep moving until we land on this 2-shot with the kitchen in the background, which sets up when they're done. And now Carmen's going to walk in from the background. Now all we need to do is just pan a little bit to catch Carmen as he's entering the conversation. And now we're going to expand that. It's just madness, because it all has to happen perfectly, right? And yeah, I was blown away. I studied that for sure. Like, as maybe you can tell or not. I was just like, oh, I see what they're doing here.
I would expect no less from you studying that. And that's exactly what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear all that passion behind that. So I know we're talking about episode 7, but I have something related that starts in episode 5. And episode 5 is called Sheridan. It's the name of Sydney's catering company, right? So we're dealing with a situation where she says, I'm used to... Actually, I don't know what episode it was, but it was a previous episode. I think it was 5. She says, no, it was 5, because she's talking about the reason she looked into catering is because she, for the first time, didn't have a psychopath yelling at her.
Fuck.
And then 2 episodes later, Carm turns into that person. But it's at the same time that Sydney is turning into that person to Marcus, right? In the clip that you played earlier. She is turning into that person, not giving him a second. Granted, everyone's stressed, but she just turned into that person as Carm is turning into that person for her. And listen, I just need to sit outside of Chris's stores, like apartment, like a mansion, whatever he's about to own, like, because he doesn't own it yet, because he's about to make so much money, because this is so good. I just had to bring that up because that's exactly what she was dreading, and she was not having to deal with for the most part. Every other time, Carm would apologize pretty quickly, and it still didn't get to that level of the anger and the fear that happened in episode 7 for everyone.
I was really frustrated for everyone on that episode because, for one, it mostly is it's kind of Sydney's fault that everything's happening.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating because she never really owns it, right? She's not that person. She's not the person to sit around and apologize. She's ready to move on when she makes a fuck up. And that's her pride. And that's that impatience thing that you were talking about earlier. And of course, Carmen explodes, and it's the attitude. And it's so fascinating because you understand why he's exploding, and you empathize with what he's trying to deal with and what everyone around him is doing, right? Marcus, if you're still fucking with those donuts, I swear I'm going to ruin your day. And he is, of course. He comes back and he's like, why are you messing with me, chef? Why are you messing with me right now? And he just detonates on, one, the worst person in that whole building to mess with is Marcus, because he was the first person on board. And he's the first person to catch the passion for himself. Not just, oh, I want to be like Carmen. It's like, no, I want to be like this. There's this thing that's already inside of me that I really want to explore, and Carmen can help me explore that. So he's not like this little Me Too guy. He's his own guy, and he's really kind and passionate, and just the only guy who's really got everyone's back in there. And he explodes on this guy, even though Marcus definitely was, screwing up. Like, what are you doing, bro? Like, you knew better. You saw what was happening around you. And yet it's what we expect out of Carmen that's the real heartbreak. It's his fault, not just because he's the head chef or because that's his business, but because we just expect more out of him. We don't expect him to ever become that guy. And we get our hearts broken by watching him become that guy, while at the same time understanding why it's happening. Like, it's such a great complex emotion that we're going through as an audience.
And he talks to Marcus about this in that same episode 5, Sheridan, when he busts the mixer and causes the fuse to break. And Marcus is like, first of all, Sid creating this outside kitchen, talking about get some bricks from across the street and let's just First of all, let's just right there. But then Marcus is off to the side and Karma's like, so are you going to be a baby? Or are you going to party now? Like, come on, are we done here? But in that, he tells Marcus it can go from chill to unchill in seconds. So you need to do your work and be on top of it. And then obviously we see that Marcus is still in the, I'm a creator, I'm an experimenter in the middle of a work day when he needs to be done with it. I love that he's sleeping there. I mean, I don't know how comfortable he is, whatever. obviously not showering. I don't know how long that's been going on, but I love that he's dedicating this time, but he needs to know when, okay, now it's time to shift gears. And Carmi warned him, and then it ended up being what it was. So yeah, you're right. Carmi broke our hearts in that episode, but we understood the level of stress they were all under because they had gotten to this system that was working. And then of course, all Sid is really trying to do is create more business. And so she had this great idea. She just didn't know all about it. She left it open, and those orders poured in. Yeah, what a way to create like a manic situation.
Yeah, truly. I mean, it's really impressive.
Because it's not even just about speed; it's about the level of food that they have, which we've seen throughout the whole season. They just don't have enough meat. He's up there selling jeans jackets and jeans and just in order to buy meat. Like, that's wild.
That's a really cool moment, right? Like, I don't have money. I'm gonna start selling my clothes in order to buy food that is just gonna keep everything moving. That's really damn cool.
Yeah.
There was another great scene that happens, the caulk scene. What is that, episode 2? Where 2 or 3, somewhere early, where they go to the hardware store, and then we're outside the. It is nice, and there's that car conversation between Sydney and Richie. And as a filmmaker, I'm watching this, and as a writer, I'm watching this, and I'm just like in awe of everything happening here because it's a really long take. And they start on Sid with Richie on the edge of the frame. And it's not like he doesn't have lines. He's going through it, but we don't have coverage here. We're just hanging out on Sid while hearing about what's important to her. And then we slowly shift to Richie as he takes the call, right? And now we're seeing what's important to him before finally shifting back to Sid to see her react and how she's going to process that. And is she with him or is she not, right? And of course we find out that she is. She got him covered. But I love that. It's long takes are a really great way to let actors create moments, to create the rhythm, not to rely on the edit to create the rhythm, but to create it there in, mise en scene, basically, right? Where the pacing is built into the writing and the directing and the performances, and it's a perfect dish, right? I'm going to use every stupid food pun I got, and to create this nice harmony. And it's just a beautiful way to not just allow it to happen, but also to frame it in a way that you're directing the audience's emotions through the camera language and through the character beats. And by not cutting, you're inviting us in and you're holding us in, or like we're captives. And you almost have no choice but to emotionally enter into their space with them. I'm curious for you. I doubt that was like written into the script. Well, depending on who wrote that script. But I'm curious, if you have thoughts on that scene, great. But also, how careful are you when you're writing to not or to direct on the page? How much are you thinking about directing on the page?
I don't think about it much. It's mostly because I've taken a directing class, and I realized, like, I really admire directors. Like, I think you all are brilliant people. And I don't know that my brain works like that. There are times where I can see a shot in my head and I'm like, if I were to, you know what I mean? But I tend not to do it, and I tend not to write. It's honestly discouraged, right? And the more classes I take, I'm hardly ever the one for someone to say take that out because I probably didn't write the shot. But I tend not to do it, mostly because I love the collaboration of this industry, and for someone who hasn't been trained that way, I want to be able to, for the most part, trust the director if I get to choose the director I'm working with, or understand like they have a skill set that I may not have yet. And it might take me some time to really get to the point where what I bring to the table would be a better idea than what they generally can bring to the table. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But you have both skill sets, so I think it's different for you.
It is. I direct a lot on the page for sure. Like if there's a specific kind of camera move that I'm thinking about, I'm probably going to talk about, we see, and I use all the we sees and we hears a lot. I don't really care about that stuff. Even when I'm reading someone else's work, if someone says, "Hey, I want you to direct this. Here's my script," I don't. I think it gets overly hyped to screenwriters to be like careful about your language here and there. I don't care. Like, I think my goal and our goal as writers is to help people see what we're seeing. And if
It is.
that's
Absolutely.
easier to do with the camera move, I want to hear what your camera move is. I might throw it away, but that's my prerogative as a director to discard what you want or don't want. And so I never hesitate, and I never have, even before I was directing, when I was just writing, to insert camera language if I thought it was pertinent to the scene. And I can't imagine trying to write something like episode 6, and you're not talking about how we're moving in through the kitchen, like that's or episode 7. There's just no way. Like if this is the goal that you as a writer have in mind, like I'm trying to communicate a feeling and I'm trying to stress you out. And if suddenly we're saying we want to do that, but you have 10 slug lines, I'm sorry, those are cuts. You've already lost the battle. Instead, you need to show lack of cuts, and you can do that through a multitude of ways. We have all kinds of tricks as writers to get our way. Through layering descriptions, right? If you are trying to communicate what someone looks like before you meet them, right? You don't just say, Sid walks into the room, 5'5", firecracker of a human. Instead, you might talk about like her shoes and what she's wearing, and you can kind of build in through your layered description a tilt, right? Shoes fastened really tight, pants cuffed and rolled, right? You can start creating a tilt through just the way you're describing things, and that's the cleverness of writing if you're on your game. And I try to do those things not just as a way to paint the picture, but also because I'm going to forget in a month when I go to shoot this thing. And so I try to leave these breadcrumbs of the way I was thinking about it while I was writing it, how I want to shoot it, and I insert that into the writing whenever I can, so that I don't forget. I'm just leaving myself a note in the script that other people just happen to get to read.
Yeah. I think there's a and please chime in about your opinion about this, but I think there's a difference in like being able to be more of the person in control, like in the indie route, right? Versus like the studio route, right? So what we hear a lot on my end, because I'm not the indie route, at least not right now, is the reason that we hear so much about what they want writers to have in and out of the scripts is because honestly, the producers who are reading the scripts, or the agents or the managers or the development execs, they just want it to be pleasurable to read. Mm-hmm. Like, it's such a thing about, and sometimes, writers get frustrated with it because the story's there. But if they're reading hundreds of scripts in a week, they're like, well, what stands out? Is this enjoyable for me to read? And what I am gathering is if it's enjoyable for them to read, then they might also find the person that they're working with enjoyable to work with. And then they feel like they have buy-in. So then the passion for them to fight for your project is there. Does that make sense? Versus 50% of these are stories, but are they making that difference in the reader's life, kind of thing? And what was I was reading or watching or doing something the other day, and it talked about how, people were talking about how, sometimes, most of the time people, especially in TV, they just want a pilot. But there are a lot of writers who know what episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are going to be. Well, the producer who wants to fight for that project wants to feel like they had something to do with episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and even the pilot. And so if you already have something so fleshed out, what are they to do? So it's a very interesting, dynamic. But I want to get back to what you're saying about the shots and the cinematography and the directing and all of that. because Christopher Storer was also a director, right? And I'm looking at his IMDb. He has directed more than he's written. And that's part of the reason that I think that this is so beautiful, like actually just visually beautiful. The story is obviously also beautiful, but you can't get away from how this is done. And although the script is very important, it's a blueprint, it's how we get there, the end game is the visual, right? And I think that that's why I just leave it to you all, because if you know what you're doing and it serves us as a story, then it can be as beautiful as this. And when you were talking about, you know, putting in little reminders to yourself, or, you know, tilt here and tilt there, when I was watching episode 2, Hands, and Carmi's on the floor cleaning the spot on the floor, and they just pull out, and the shot gets wider, I was just like, I don't know that I would have thought, maybe as I grow as a writer, I would have put something in there about pulling the camera out, but my God, that just showed how much he cared, how meticulous he is, how this matters to him, and the game that he's playing. No one else is there at that point. Everyone else has gone, and how that shot just served that part of the story so well.
It's beautiful, and I can imagine writing that. You know, I might add in Carmi's on his hands and knees, scrubbing with the toothbrush or whatever, and he's focused, he's intent, right? We slowly recede through the back of the kitchen.
I wouldn't have the slowly recede.
Yeah,
that's the part that I don't know how to do.
Right, and I that is the benefit maybe of being, you know, a filmmaker, and I'm used to thinking in the visual language that I'm going to be filming in. But being able to think in that will help you, I think, helps the reader see his isolation also, right? Because you could easily just stay there with him instead of leaving the episode that way. But by doing that, it's one that's obviously a great way to end an episode or a scene or a moment or an emotional beat, is by giving it space and breath. And it allows obviously in the edit, it allows the viewer to sit in this emotion. But on the page, you have to have something that tells you that you're sitting in that emotion, or else it just looks like a period and that's the end of the scene. And so by adding some kind of move or something that indicates we're still here experiencing this moment, is a way to let the reader sit and stew in the same way that the viewer is going to sit and stew. And I think that's another benefit for camera language being inserted into a script. Now, I know this is heresy because, like you said, every teacher, every coach, every class is going to be like, you know, red flags here and there. But ultimately, if you start thinking in these ways, it'll impact the reader. And that's really our only goal, is to impact the reader, and to help them see the story more. And if you can start to trigger these emotions through, like, we rotate around, as his world spins out of control, we rotate around him, as he's trying to get a grip on the moment or whatever, right? You're double downing on an emotional thing that's happening within the story by expressing it also through the visual of what the viewer is going to be experiencing. And now you're able to paint that picture much more vividly in someone's head, is my view, my completely incorrect, unprofessional view. But at the same time, I'm sure you go read some early Shane Black, you know, screenplays, you're going to come across some really wild shit, you know, before anyone gave him a camera.
I mean, I personally enjoy it because it does help me see. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just one of those things that's not encouraged, and so it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Why do you think Richie put the letter back? So and like didn't give it to him for 5 episodes or 6.
That was such a great move, writing wise, because it also fits so in tune with his character of being a dick. And so whenever I see that happen, like, again, they do such an incredible job of throwing it onto the audience. Everything, right? And they have a lot of sub-talk, like all the subtextual conversation that they don't spell out. You just have to catch up, right? Like, Sugar and Carmi having that conversation after the bullet hits the window, and he's like, "Hey, we need to do it." And she just tells him, she cuts into everything apropos of jack shit. She just says, "Keep not processing." Like, what?
And he's like, don't open a restaurant with a drug addict. Like,
where are we at right now?
all right.
Like, they're making the viewer catch up and understand that they have this whole other line of conversation that's ongoing at all times, at all moments. Whenever their name pops up or their face pops up, there's a running conversation that's happening, and it's on you to catch up with it. And in that same way, whenever I see Richie put that note back and we all yell at him, I'm thinking the thing that he says at the end to me was complete bullshit. Like, maybe over the days it became that thing of I wasn't ready, to admit, or whatever it is that he says. But in that moment, I think it's totally about, fuck you, Carmen. You get a note, I don't get a note. You don't get this. Whatever's in here, you don't get, because I'm so upset with how everything is going. This was supposed to be my restaurant, and he left it to you. I think all those other things, the last thing I'm thinking is, he's just really sad about losing his friend. What did you think?
I thought he thought that Carmi hadn't suffered enough to get it yet. Like, he waited until Carmi was like at his end. Richie had to build more empathy for the situation. Similar to what you're saying, like, this was his, like, he was pretty much the sous chef. You know what I mean? Like, this was his thing, and this was his whatever. And then Carmi comes in from this fancy life and is trying to change everything. But it was a very, very interesting choice. And it was probably the only time I was like, what? Why? But then now realizing, yeah, that needed to wait. There was something in there that needed to wait, that we didn't need to know was there until the end.
Ugh.
I tell you, this made me get back in the kitchen recently.
Did it?
Yeah, because I remember how beautiful it is. I don't always have the time, but just like to cook a meal from scratch, and just the aroma and the process and the texture of just like really, and not even very complicated meals, but just simple, good food.
For the past year, I've been working on my pizza, like dough from scratch, all that stuff, and I'm getting there. I feel like it's really, really close. I'm stuck though. I'm at a point where I don't know what to do to take it to the next level, and so it is fun. I mean, maybe I need to switch gears and work on like pasta or something else. I would love to make a good ravioli, for instance. That would be cool. I'm not even a pasta fan. I don't like pasta, but yeah, I think watching something like this does make me feel motivated to just go back into the kitchen and create something, right? Or get really good at one thing. What's that one thing? I don't know, but I'm gonna get really good at it.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines that I will never forget is when Richie and Cindy were in Richie's car, and Richie says, "Sorry, I wasn't expecting company. These Arby's cups are from 2 different trips." Like, I get that.
She says, "I respect that."
I respect that. I mean, just such authentic conversation and language in there. Yeah. No, I didn't get 2 Cokes from Arby's on the same night. I did not.
And I just need you to know that.
Yeah.
But they do. They have a lot of these great small victories all throughout the series. Whether it's Marcus finally making good bread right at the beginning. He's like, "Hey, put a pan full of water underneath and blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "See the difference, right?" He's like, "I do." Very good, chef. Like, and I love that use of the word chef, because that's another one of those little markers of who's on board and who's not. And they just sprinkle that kind of stuff to obscurely yet obviously create a really tender moment, right? Because you're in this world full of hard asses. Everyone's a hard ass. Everyone's, just cocky, doesn't want to hear nothing from nobody. But through the use of a word, suddenly you can melt everyone around. Like, oh, so good. Such good writing.
And then when Tina finally calls Sydney, chef, stop. done. I was done.
I love it. I could easily go back through this a few more times and start to just keep picking up all these little pieces. They just do everything so well. The exposition is constant and fast, and it starts simple, right? I miss him too, right? Miss who? And then they slowly, over the course of 5 or 6 episodes, build up Michael through bits and pieces of I miss him, grieve, damn you, right? Like just yelling and through bills, just looking through bills. What the hell was he thinking? And it's just.
And Marcus knew, so Marcus didn't know Michael, and so that's a whole another thing that was interesting to see. And it's very interesting. This is really kudos to the team.
Kudos all the freaking way around. Nice. I think that's all I got. I'm surprised, not at all, that we went this long. Any final words, thoughts?
If you haven't seen this show, well, we just kind of spoiled it for you, but please watch. It is worth, I would say, a lot of people's time. I can't guarantee that it's everyone, but it is really well done. If you can handle language, you can most likely handle most of this. So, yeah.
Agreed. I can't wait to see what season 2 brings in store. Any predictions?
I don't, I was thinking about this. I was like, we've explored Sid's home life. We've kind of explored Carmi's, midnight frozen wrapper cooking home life, a little bit of Sugar's, a little bit of Richie's. We don't know much about Marcus except for Chester, Abraham, Sweeps. And then we got a little glimpse of Tina's son, but not anything else. So I don't know if they're going to go in that direction. Obviously, they've renamed the restaurant. So what does that also mean? Like rebranding, all of that type of stuff. What else are they going to change? Or is it going to look the same? Are they going to change the tables, the decor, like paint, any of that kind of stuff? The dishwashers are fascinating for the little bit that we get to see them. Are we ever going to see Carmi's mom? They talk about her, but we haven't. He hasn't gone to see her. She's asking. She's obviously in a tough place. And then, we're doing all this money. Now we have all this money, but money is owed.
That's one of my big questions. How does Cicero react to them finding all this money and then using it to refurbish the restaurant?
It's interesting because the question is, and I don't know if you have a conclusion. It's like, well, he borrowed the money, but then he hid money. So did he not pay? Why didn't he pay it back? Or did he think that Carmi could do better with what was there than he could? Which is honestly saying a whole hell of a lot about what he thinks about Carmi, his ability to manage, to lead, vision, etc.
Yeah. That was kind of my final impression was my internalized version of Mikey was that he was trying to get that money because he knew he was going to end it, and he wanted to leave something to Carmen to do his own thing. Maybe we find out in season 2 that Carmen was miserable, right? Which we kind of see at the opening of episode 2, right? With Joel McHale in his ear just saying the word. And it was interesting because he's whispering instead of yelling. And there's more than one way to be a terrible human being, right? In a kitchen. And he's like saying, I'm a piece of shit. I'm a piece of shit, chef. Like he's just ripping them to shreds, right? And so maybe that's the kind of thing that Mikey knew that he needed to save his brother. And in order to do that, it required this. But there's also that little throwaway comment that Mikey always was an entrepreneur, right? He had a new business idea every 10 minutes. And so did he like double his money? How much money exactly was there? We don't know. We're assuming it's $330,000 or whatever. But TBD, I guess, what the body count is on that.
But also, how did he get that into the cans? You needed an additional way to do that, right? Yeah. So who else knows?
Fair question.
I mean, I don't want to go like Breaking Bad dark level, but like who else knows? You
Right.
know?
Is that money owed to someone that is now about to come looking, other than Cicero?
Or if it's just someone else with more information that we're looking for, that they're looking for. It's very, very fast. And exactly how powerful is Cicero?
I love Oliver
Um,
Platt. I'm just glad that he's in this. I'm a big
and
fan.
Molly Ringwald? Like, how is Molly Ringwald in
Was
this?
that her? I wasn't sure if that was her or not. I'm not good with faces.
I I thought it was. I think I looked it up, and that's just a little fascinating tidbit that we can talk about another time. But I was just like, this is Wells. This is amazing.
Just
This,
random.
this is
Nice.
yeah.
All
So,
right. Well, thank you for joining me, Key. Hopefully, we can do something else again in the near future. I would love to like read a script, like read Dune, and then watch the movie, and then compare and contrast like what happened in the screenplay versus what ended up on the screen. I think that's a really informative process. Yeah. So something
yeah.
like that
If
would
we
be.
can get it, that would be great.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean in general or for this show?
Yeah, for this show, but yeah,
Yeah.
that would be fun.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks again, and appreciate everyone who stuck around. So, see y'all later. Bye.